What if Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of the Sith, was suddenly thrown into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? Could the galaxy's most feared enforcer survive in a universe where demons walk freely and war is eternal? What role would he play in the Imperium of man? An inquisitor, a chapter master, or perhaps something even greater? How many space marines could Darth Vader defeat with his lightsaber and the Force at his command? Could he stand against the Primarchs themselves, the demigod warriors of the Emperor of mankind? And what if chaos tried to corrupt him, to twist his rage and his hatred into something even darker? Would Vader become a loyal servant of the Imperium, or a new instrument of destruction feared by all? Today, we answer these questions. We explore the battles, the alliances, and the unimaginable horrors that await Darth Vader in the 41st millennium. So sit back and imagine a galaxy torn apart by war, a universe where the Force meets the warp, and one man, encased in black armor, breathing through the hiss of machinery, walks among gods, monsters, and legends. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our what-if journeys into the worlds you love. Now, let's step into the far future. Let's step into the grim darkness of Warhammer 40,000. Darth Vader's shuttle drifted through the infinite void, but it was no ordinary void. The star stretched and warped, twisting into impossible shapes that seemed alive, writhing and pulsing with malevolent intent. The instrument screamed with warnings, yet none of it startled him. He had survived fire, betrayal, and the abyss of Mustafar. He would endure this. The warp wrapped around his senses like a living tide. Voices, countless, overlapping, whispered promises, threats, secrets. Each syllable carried weight, pressing against his mind, probing for weakness. Yet Vader focused, drawing upon the Force. It hummed beneath his skin, steadying his thoughts, guiding his hands across the controls. The turbulence of the warp was no match for a will forged in anger and discipline. For hours he drifted, the warp testing him with visions that flickered along the edges of his perception. Skeletal hands clawing at the viewport, flames erupting across corridors that did not exist, forms that stretched and vanished before he could fully comprehend them. Each step, each motion required perfect control. The slightest hesitation could allow the storm to consume him entirely. And yet, he pressed forward. Through the chaos, a faint shimmer appeared, light against the storm. Towering vessels emerged from the shadows, immense and alien. Their hulls were etched with glyphs that glowed with psychic energy, and banners adorned with skulls fluttered in the void. The sheer scale of the fleet made even a star destroyer seem small. The Imperium had found him. Sensors aboard the ships lit up, weapons charged, and voxcasters bellowed orders in languages Vader did not know. The crew aboard these vessels froze at the sight of him. To the Mechanicus, he was a living manifestation of flesh and machine fused perfectly. A being who could only exist as proof of the machine god's will. Their awe was palpable, a mix of fear and reverence. The Astartes observed with the disciplined caution of warriors who had faced centuries of war, their instincts telling them this was no ordinary being. Vader stepped from the shuttle onto the deck of one of the vessels. His black armor gleamed under harsh lights, the hiss of his respirator filling the chamber with its steady mechanical rhythm. Every gaze fixed on him, every mind processing the presence of a figure unlike any they had ever seen. His imposing form moved with deliberate precision, each step echoing authority, each motion a signal that this was no ordinary intruder. He observed them all, the humans in their varied forms, the superhuman Astartes, the cybernetic adepts of the Mechanicus. Discipline and devotion radiated from them. Yet beneath it, he sensed suffering, the weight of millennia of endless war. Humanity in this age had been tempered by fire and despair, their faith forged in pain and duty. Vader's mechanical eyes scanned the corridors, noting every detail, every anomaly, every hint of potential threat. The Force guided him, pulling him into harmony with this new reality, even as the warp pressed against him. He could sense the currents around him, psychic energy from the fleet, emotions from the crew, the faint stirrings of beings beyond perception. Everything here had purpose. Everything had meaning. And yet, it was foreign. Vader's first impressions of humanity in the 41st millennium were clear. They were disciplined, unyielding, and unbreakable in ways he had never seen. Their devotion to their leaders, their faith in their cause, and their resilience in the face of infinite suffering rivaled anything the galaxy had ever produced. Here in the far future, there were warriors who could endure the warp, who could walk through fire and death with unwavering resolve. And Vader understood, even at this first contact, that he had arrived in a world unlike his own, a world of unimaginable scale, infinite danger, and boundless power. Yet, he was not lost. He had adapted before, and he would adapt again. Here, in this universe of war eternal, Darth Vader would survive. He would endure, and he would rise. The first step into the 41st millennium had been taken. The galaxy watched, the warp whispered, and Darth Vader had arrived. The shuttle's engines hummed as it settled into the fleet's formation. Outside, the void seemed calm, but Vader could feel the subtle tremors of the warp pressing against the hull. The presence of so many massive ships, infused with psychic energy and adorned with sacred symbols, was overwhelming. Yet he remained composed. He had faced armies before, but nothing like this. Sensors aboard the vessels flared, and voxcasters projected orders in rapid bursts of alien language. Mechanicus adepts moved with precision, adjusting calibration tools and monitoring psychic signatures. Even among these tech priests, the presence of Vader produced a mixture of awe and uncertainty. He was flesh and machine fused perfectly, an embodiment of cybernetic supremacy they had only theorized about. Their minds struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what they witnessed. Vader's shuttle touched the landing platform, the ramp lowering with a metallic hiss. He stepped out deliberately, each motion measured, his black armor reflecting the cold light of the vessel. The hiss of his respirator echoed through the chamber. Every figure present froze, their senses registering the arrival of a being unlike any they had seen. Astride the deck, Vader projected an aura of absolute authority, not with words, but with presence alone. The Mechanicus were the first to move. Adepts approached, their robes flowing, carrying data tomes and arcane implements. Their eyes, enhanced with ocular augmetics, scanned Vader in meticulous detail. To them, he was proof of a union between flesh and machine that transcended their understanding, a living exemplar of the machine god's perfection. Whispered communications passed among them, laced with reverence and wonder. The Adeptus Astartes regarded him with caution. Tactical marines shifted slightly, bolters at the ready, yet their movements betrayed curiosity. Here stood a warrior in black, fully encased in power armor that rivaled even the most advanced ceramite designs. His movements were precise, his form imposing. They could sense the force radiating from him, a power they had never encountered, something beyond their comprehension, yet eerily familiar in its resonance with the warp. Vader's gaze swept over the assembly. Discipline and focus radiated from the crew, from the tech priests to the marines. The stark contrast to the galaxy he had left behind was clear. Here, every action had purpose, every motion obeyed ritual, every soul seemed bound by devotion. Humanity had become a crucible, tempered by centuries of warfare, suffused with suffering, and yet remarkably resilient. He could sense it, the weight of millennia pressing upon these humans, shaping them into something more than flesh. Their faith in their leaders, their unwavering obedience, their capacity to endure torment and conflict impressed him. There was a strange nobility here, a devotion born not of hope or optimism, but of necessity and duty. Mechanicus adepts moved closer, instruments extended to scan, to measure, to record. Vader allowed it, standing perfectly still, the hum of the Force coursing through him as a shield. They noted the cybernetic implants integrated seamlessly into his body, the precise articulation of each joint, the energy conduits beneath his armor. To them, he was both a marvel and a weapon, a living relic capable of feats no machine alone could achieve. A tactical squad of Astartes approached under the gaze of their sergeant. They did not speak. Their eyes, enhanced by ceramite helmets, studied him carefully. Vader could sense their intentions, the disciplined caution ingrained in warriors bred for centuries of combat. There was no fear, only awareness and readiness. He adjusted his stance subtly, the force flowing through him, preparing for any potential hostility. Despite the alien nature of this place, Vader found clarity. The warp's whispers were still present, but here, among these humans, its pressure was filtered. Their discipline acted as a barrier, their collective psychic stability anchoring reality around them. He could walk among them without being consumed. He could observe, learn, and perhaps even influence. Vader's first impressions were unmistakable. These humans were survivors. They bore the scars of countless wars, yet they moved with purpose, devotion, and resilience that even the Sith could respect. Their faith, their suffering, and their discipline created a strength that rivaled anything he had encountered in the galaxy he had known. As the shuttle's ramp closed behind him, Vader walked forward onto the bridge of the vessel. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. He had arrived, not merely as an observer, but as a force in this new universe. The Imperium watched him, the warp whispered, and Darth Vader began to understand the vastness, the danger, and the potential of the 41st millennium. The journey had only begun. He had survived the warp. He had endured the first contact. And now he would face the trials of a galaxy defined by endless war, infinite suffering, and unyielding devotion. In this place, there was no room for hesitation. Every action, every choice, every movement could mean survival or death. Darth Vader had arrived, and the Imperium, for the first time, truly knew a presence unlike any it had ever encountered. The galaxy had endured eons of war, corruption, and heresy,
yet nothing in its grim history could have prepared it for the arrival of Darth Vader. Black armor reflecting the cold light of distant suns, the hiss of his respirator echoing across command halls, and a presence that seemed to bend reality itself announced a being unlike any other. Fleet admirals, planetary governors, and the lowest acolytes of the Mechanicus whispered of him, some in awe, others in fear. In a universe defined by loyalty, devotion, and unending conflict, Vader was not a visitor, he was a force of inevitable consequence. The 41st millennium had met its new agent. 3 possibilities unfolded before him, each reflecting a different facet of his mastery. The first was the path of the Inquisitor, a hand of the Emperor capable of enforcing law, hunting heretics, and interrogating the minds of the guilty. Vader moved through worlds as a shadow of judgment. Heretical cults festering in the undercities of hive worlds were purged before their rites could begin. Rogue psychers, their minds warped by the touch of the warp, were apprehended without a single casualty. The Force became an instrument of detection and persuasion, revealing hidden motives and unraveling lies with terrifying efficiency. Prisoners would meet him in the silence of interrogation chambers, only to find that resistance was futile. Thoughts, emotions, and memories became transparent under the weight of his scrutiny. Those who had deceived their peers or the Emperor's servants were exposed, their secrets rendered meaningless by the sheer certainty of his methods. Fear became a tool of obedience, and obedience was inevitable. The second possibility lay in the halls of the Adeptus Mechanicus, where archmagos and tech priests revered him as a living fusion of man and machine. Vader's armor was no mere protection, it was a template for perfection. Life support systems integrated seamlessly with his biological functions. Energy conduits responded to gestures and intent. Combat enhancements moved in synchrony with his reflexes and willpower. Archmagos studied him obsessively, recording the smallest detail, the flow of power through his limbs, the modulation of respirator cycles, the micro-adjustments in servo motors as he walked, as he fought, as he commanded. In whispered reverence, they spoke of him as the Dark Techno-Saint, a being whose existence revealed the potential for human-machine synergy far beyond the imagination of Mars. Inspired by his presence, the Mechanicus developed innovations, new designs for servitors capable of subtle battlefield maneuvers, enhanced neural interfaces for commanders, and tactical computation systems that mirrored Vader's predictive instincts. His example reshaped the doctrines of cybernetic warfare, not merely as inspiration, but as a living blueprint for centuries to come. The third possibility manifested in the Astartes, where chapters observed him and began to adjust their tactics. Tactical squads executed maneuvers with precision that seemed prescient. Assault units struck with timing that defied expectation, and Devastator squads targeted enemy positions with devastating accuracy. Orcs, Tyrannid swarms, and renegade human forces alike fell to campaigns shaped by Vader's insight. Yet he did not command through authority alone. He trained, guided, and shaped the decisions of veteran warriors without diminishing their individuality. He merged the Codex Astartes with instincts that transcended doctrine, teaching captains to anticipate threats before they emerged and to act decisively when others hesitated. Under Vader's guidance, chapters became instruments of efficiency. Their lethality multiplied not merely by numbers, but by the coordination and foresight he instilled. Even as Vader assumed these roles, the Imperial leadership took notice. High Lords of Terra debated in long, intense sessions over the presence of this singular warrior. Some feared his autonomy, others envied his effectiveness. Malkador the Sigillite, always a master of subtle guidance, recognized Vader's potential and granted him latitude while maintaining oversight. The Emperor himself, distant yet omniscient, perceived the unique variable Vader represented, a being whose abilities could tip campaigns, enforce law, and stabilize sectors with unprecedented efficiency. Vader neither sought his favor nor demanded it. Instead, he operated according to results, letting the outcomes of his intervention speak louder than any ceremonial title or rank. Vader's personality was an unusual fit for the Imperium. His discipline, focus, and ruthlessness complemented the dogmatic devotion of Imperial servants, yet also challenged their conventions. Bureaucrats and administrators accustomed to slow deliberation found themselves unsettled by the efficiency and decisiveness of his actions. Admirals and generals, trained to deliberate over weeks, were confronted with tactical solutions that unfolded in moments, almost as if the Force itself whispered strategies into his mind. Yet his authority did not rely on fear alone. Respect and loyalty were earned through competence, through the undeniable certainty that when Vader acted, the results were absolute. Even those who feared him could not deny his effectiveness. As months passed, the galaxy began to adapt to his presence. Rebel uprisings were crushed before they fully ignited. Rogue psychers were neutralized without spreading corruption. Chaos cults discovered that their secrets were transparent before the weight of his observation. Space Marine chapters incorporated his methods into their doctrines, and planetary governors deferred to his judgment even without understanding why. Across the sectors, a quiet transformation took place. The Imperium became more efficient, more coordinated, more deadly because of the singular influence of this black-armored figure. Yet beneath the armor, behind the mask, Vader carried the shadow of another galaxy. Memories of servitude, rage, loss, and ambition lingered, mingling with the rigid doctrines and devotion of the Imperium. Each campaign tested his discipline. Each interrogation challenged his detachment. Each engagement with mortal and superhuman forces reminded him of the duality of his existence, part executioner, part servant, part shadow of a master long gone. Still he adapted, blending the ruthlessness and precision of the Sith with the unwavering loyalty demanded by the Emperor. In this universe of unending war, he had found a stage worthy of his mastery. By the end of his first cycles of operation, one fact had become undeniable. Vader was no mere agent. He had become an axis of power, a fulcrum upon which fleets, chapters, and sectors pivoted. His presence was absolute. Fear, respect, and inevitability followed wherever he moved. The Imperium had gained not just a weapon, but a mind capable of reshaping outcomes across hundreds of worlds. And Vader had found a universe that would both challenge and magnify the mastery he had honed for decades in another galaxy.
With his presence established across multiple sectors, Darth Vader's influence spread far beyond mere tactical victories or interrogations. The Imperium, vast, ancient, and fractious, began to operate differently wherever he moved. Planetary governors deferred to his judgment, recognizing that outcomes shifted according to his assessment even without understanding the methods he employed. Fleet admirals learned to anticipate his strategic choices, adjusting warp routes, formations, and engagement plans to synchronize with the inevitability of his interventions. Heretical uprisings that might have destabilized entire systems were crushed in their infancy. Rogue psychers, previously capable of causing chaos across planets, were neutralized swiftly and quietly. The galaxy began to recognize a singular truth. Darth Vader was not simply a commander or enforcer. He was the axis upon which the Imperium's efficiency pivoted, a force whose calculations shaped events across thousands of light years. Interactions with the Primarchs and other Imperial leaders were subtle but decisive. Some, initially wary, attempted controlled engagements to test his skill and resolve, only to discover that his combination of foresight, force mastery, and battlefield intuition exceeded their expectations. Tactical analyses, usually dominated by codex adherents, were redefined under his scrutiny. Space Marine captains and chapter masters learned to anticipate movements, not merely of enemy forces, but of their own allies under Vader's guidance. The Emperor, observing these developments from afar, recognized a unique variable in play, a singular agent whose presence altered calculations, strategy, and morale across the Imperium. High Lords of Terra debated whether to regulate his operations more strictly, yet they could not deny the results achieved under his influence. Malkador the Sigillite, ever the subtle manipulator, maintained oversight while allowing Vader the freedom necessary to magnify Imperial effectiveness. Vader's integration into the Imperial hierarchy was an exercise in balance. He respected command structures, yet his methods occasionally clashed with bureaucratic conventions. Administrators who expected ritual and procedure found themselves confronted by decisive action and outcomes determined by instinct, strategy, and premonition. Admirals and generals accustomed to measured deliberation discovered that under Vader, timing and initiative could shift the balance of entire campaigns. Yet his authority was not imposed through coercion alone. Respect and obedience were earned through competence, through the certainty that when Darth Vader acted, victory or resolution followed. Fear and admiration intertwined, creating a presence that inspired devotion even among those who did not fully comprehend his power.
The influence of Vader's tactical insight was profound. Astarte's chapters recalibrated assault squads, devastator fire arcs, and tactical maneuvers to align with his predictive understanding of the battlefield. Planetary governors, previously concerned only with maintaining order, now coordinated planetary defenses according to his strategies, minimizing civilian casualties while maximizing operational efficiency. Fleet admirals adapted warp travel, engagement timing, and deployment formations to mirror his expectations. Even the warp itself seemed to respond differently under his influence, as if the currents and echoes of psychic energy recognized the presence of a being attuned to both the physical and metaphysical planes of war. Vader's psychological integration into the Imperium was as meticulous as his strategic influence. The lingering shadows of his Sith training, rage, ambition, the discipline of servitude, and the echoes of loss coexisted with the dogmatic devotion, loyalty, and hierarchy of the Emperor's realm. Each campaign tested him. Each negotiation, training session, or engagement with mortal and superhuman forces revealed the duality of his nature. Part executioner, part guide, part observer of the galaxy's unending conflict. Yet he adapted. He translated the instincts of the Sith into methods compatible with the Imperium, blending ruthlessness with efficiency, intimidation with inspiration, and precision with loyalty. In doing so, he transformed from an outsider into a fulcrum upon which outcomes turned, respected and feared in equal measure. His presence also reshaped the Imperial doctrine itself. Codex tactics and fleet strategies evolved under his subtle guidance. Chapters of Astartes found that integrating his predictive methods increased effectiveness beyond traditional coordination. Planetary defense systems and administrative protocols adapted to his interventions, incorporating lessons from his executions of campaigns and purges. Rogue elements that might have previously thrived found themselves preemptively neutralized, and even the most disciplined Imperial organizations adjusted to synchronize with his presence. Every action reinforced his role as a force multiplier, a being whose influence reached across systems, sectors, and fleets without overtly disturbing the existing order. Despite his power, Vader remained ever aware of the dual nature of his existence.
He was not a figure of unquestioned loyalty to a master in this galaxy, yet he had embraced the Imperium's mission. The Sith shadows within him, the lingering anger, the desire for domination, and the cold logic of a warrior trained for conquest coexisted uneasily with the devotion, discipline, and reverence demanded by the Emperor's realm. Each decision, whether in strategy, interrogation, or leadership, reflected a careful balance between his instincts and the demands of the Imperium. In this universe, unlike the one he had left behind, he had no Sith master to command him. Instead, he had a galaxy of endless war that demanded his attention, focus, and adaptation. By the end of his initial campaigns, the galaxy recognized a fundamental truth. Darth Vader had become indispensable. He was no mere enforcer or commander. He was an agent capable of shaping battles, campaigns, and the very operations of the Imperium across thousands of worlds. He had harmonized the demands of hierarchy, the subtleties of leadership, and the unending chaos of war into a coherent force. Fear, respect, and obedience followed wherever he walked. The Imperium, in turn, had gained a presence capable of magnifying its power beyond any known precedent. And Darth Vader, bound by neither bureaucracy nor ceremony, had found a galaxy worthy of his mastery, a universe in which his will, discipline, and unmatched abilities could define outcomes, reshape doctrine, and leave an indelible mark on the grim darkness of the 41st millennium.
The battlefield was a crucible, a place where the might of the Imperium met its most devoted warriors. Tactical Marines, clad in ceramite armor, moved in disciplined formations, bolters ready, their senses trained to the extreme. They had faced countless threats in centuries of war, orcs, tyrannids, chaos cults, but none like the black-armored figure that emerged from the smoke and shadow. Darth Vader, his lightsaber glowing crimson against the dim light of ruined cities, advanced with an eerie calm, the hiss of his respirator a prelude to the storm of destruction he brought with him. One-on-one encounters began cautiously. Tactical Marines, the backbone of every chapter, approached with standard combat drills, bolters raised, and chainswords at the ready. Vader moved with unnatural precision, anticipating every movement. The Force guided his actions. He felt the recoil of bolters before the shots were fired, sensed the intent behind every strike of chainsword or power fist, and responded with telekinetic deflection and razor-sharp timing. Even the most seasoned veterans found their instincts insufficient against him. A single Marine charged, a power sword swinging. Vader countered in fluid motion, the lightsaber intercepting with a hum that echoed through the ruins. The armor absorbed the strike's force, yet the momentum of the encounter left the Marine off balance. Within moments, the engagement was over. The Marine, stunned but alive, recognized the lethal precision of a combatant who transcended conventional tactics. Scouts, often underestimated due to their light armor and reconnaissance role, tested his reflexes differently. Their speed and unpredictability were assets, but Vader anticipated movements through the Force. He redirected attacks, using telekinesis to unbalance them, throw weapons aside, and manipulate the environment itself. Rocks, debris, and shattered structures became extensions of his control, turning the battlefield into a series of traps from which no scout could escape unharmed. One attempted a flanking maneuver through rubble. Vader sensed the shift in momentum, intercepted mid-stride, and neutralized the threat with minimal effort. It was a dance of precision and calculation, a demonstration that no level of training could fully prepare a Space Marine for an opponent who could predict the flow of combat as if the battlefield itself whispered his name. Small squad engagements,
5 to 10 Marines tested Vader's strategic adaptability. Tactical squads advanced in formation, bolter synchronized, assaults coordinated. Vader moved among them like a specter, deflecting rounds of bolter fire with the Force, using the lightsaber to parry, block, and redirect attacks with near-inhuman timing. He seized opportunities to isolate individuals, telekinetically hurling one Marine into another, exploiting the gaps in formation with lethal precision. Assault Marines attempted to close distance, their jump packs propelling them through shattered towers and ruins. Vader responded with anticipation, intercepting mid-air with his saber, redirecting kinetic energy through the Force, and landing blows that incapacitated without unnecessary waste. The battlefield became a testament to his mastery, demonstrating that even a small squad, disciplined and trained, could not match the combination of tactical genius and Force-enhanced reflexes he brought to bear. Mechanically, his abilities worked in tandem with the physics of the Imperium's weapons. Ceramite armor, designed to withstand plasma blasts and bolter rounds, proved resilient against conventional strikes, but struggled against his Force-infused momentum and lightsaber strikes. Telekinetic manipulation allowed him to bypass brute strength, lifting limbs, redirecting weapons, and exploiting the weight and inertia of armor to destabilize his opponents. Bolter fire, though deadly against unarmored targets, became largely ceremonial against him. Shots deflected mid-flight or absorbed and redirected with minimal exposure. Even the heaviest hits, when they connected, failed to disrupt his balance for more than fractions of a second, giving him ample time to counterattack with lethal precision. The first true test of his survival came under saturation fire. A small garrison of 10 tactical Marines opened a volley of bolter fire in a confined area, their rounds tearing through walls and scattering debris. Vader advanced steadily, the hum of his lightsaber cutting through the cacophony, deflecting, absorbing, and redirecting rounds with uncanny control. His breathing was rhythmic, almost meditative, while the Marine's bullets shredded the environment around him. He used the Force to manipulate cover, deflect debris, and maintain momentum, demonstrating that even against concentrated firepower, his awareness, reflexes, and predictive calculation rendered him nearly untouchable. A single misstep might have meant death, but Vader's mastery of the Force, combined with centuries of combat experience, ensured he survived every volley. Squad cohesion proved no match for his foresight. Tactical coordination, usually a Space Marine's strength, became a weakness under his analysis. He predicted flanks, telekinetically disrupted formations, and exploited moments of hesitation. When a sergeant attempted to lead a counter-assault, Vader sensed the intent, intercepted their advance, and neutralized both leader and squad in a single flowing engagement. Even elite units were unable to leverage standard doctrine against him. The Force allowed him to see potential futures, the lightsaber to enforce them, and his will to impose inevitability. The final engagements of this part of the campaign tested individual champions. Blade masters and captains sought to challenge him directly, bringing skill, experience, and enhanced reflexes into single duels. Vader's lightsaber met their weapons with fluid, devastating efficiency. Every strike considered not only the weapon, but the wearer's mass, momentum, and psychic intent. Armor, once a near-impenetrable shield, could not compensate for his combination of predictive insight, telekinetic manipulation, and raw Force strength. Even when counters were attempted, the very environment became an extension of his control. Debris, rubble, and kinetic energy itself redirected to strike with lethal precision. In these early skirmishes, one lesson became undeniable. Darth Vader was not merely a warrior confronting Space Marines. He was a singular tactical phenomenon, a force capable of predicting, controlling, and redirecting the battlefield itself. One-on-one, he overwhelmed individual Marines with a combination of insight and speed. Small squads fell under his precision control. Even saturation fire proved insufficient to harm him seriously. Ceramite armor, weapons, and standard tactics all were rendered secondary to his mastery of the Force and his battlefield intuition.
The battlefield expanded, and with it the scale of combat. Now Darth Vader faced medium squads of 10 to 15 Space Marines, each unit a compact engine of precision and lethality. Tactical, assault, and devastator squads coordinated, their movements synchronized, bolter fire disciplined, and chainswords primed for rapid engagement. The cacophony of gunfire, jump pack thrums, and shouted orders filled the air. Yet Vader moved through it with an uncanny calm. Every shot, every strike, every maneuver was anticipated, and the Force became an extension of his senses, allowing him to perceive the entire flow of combat simultaneously. Assault squads attempted rapid flanking maneuvers, their jump packs propelling them above ruined cathedrals and shattered streets. Vader leapt into the air with equal fluidity, Force-assisted momentum carrying him across debris-strewn chasms, intercepting Marines mid-flight. Bolter rounds exploded around him, yet his awareness allowed him to catch fragments of kinetic energy, redirecting them with a subtle gesture of his hand. He was at once a storm of offense and a wall of defense, his crimson lightsaber intercepting blades and rounds alike. Individual Marines found themselves unbalanced, isolated, and manipulated by a force they could not see. Vader's telekinetic control escalated. Debris, rubble, and even enemy weapons became projectiles under his will. A Devastator Marine crouched behind shattered fortifications, heavy bolter braced and fired. Vader extended the force, redirecting the rounds mid-flight, spinning the bolter around and tossing the Marine aside. Tactical squads attempting synchronized volleys found their formations disrupted before their volleys could reach him. Force-pushed grenades tore through enemy cover, while walls of debris cut off avenues of approach, turning the battlefield into a maze that always favored his movement and foresight. Even the most disciplined chopper could not anticipate how his mastery of the Force allowed him to dominate every engagement, turning environment and enemy alike into tools of his offense. The clash with elite captains and blade champions tested his skill at the highest level. These were veterans whose reflexes, strategy, and combat experience were unmatched even among Astartes. Each engagement became a symphony of attack and counter, lightsaber arcs meeting power blades in sparks and collisions that echoed across ruined fortresses. Vader moved with precision, his strikes calculated not merely to hit, but to exploit weaknesses in armor, momentum, and balance. He sensed shifts in their intent before they acted, telekinetically redirecting their strikes, disarming where necessary, and landing blows that incapacitated without unnecessary injury or structural damage. The champion struck with a flurry, but Vader flowed with it, each clash a demonstration of perfect anticipation and control. Ceramite armor, usually impervious to conventional force, resisted the blows, but could not counter the combination of kinetic manipulation, precision strikes, and force-augmented speed. Strategically, he assessed engagements as an entire tableau rather than isolated duels. Space Marine squads moved with intent, yet he recognized the predictable patterns underlying their training. Tactical, assault, and devastator units fell into rhythms dictated by doctrine, and Vader exploited these patterns through preemptive strikes, telekinetic intervention, and controlled engagements. His ability to manipulate not only individuals but groups transformed the battlefield into a three-dimensional puzzle.
Marines attacking in unison suddenly found themselves colliding with one another, isolated and vulnerable, while he moved unhindered through their ranks. In a scenario designed to test his limits, a full squad coordinated saturation fire with overlapping bolter arcs, suppressive cover, and heavy ordnance. The ground shook under the volume of fire, walls crumbled, and kinetic force threatened to unbalance him. Yet Vader advanced, using the force to redirect bullets, absorb kinetic energy, and maintain spatial awareness. He manipulated debris as shields, telekinetically lifted objects to intercept rounds, and moved with a preternatural rhythm. Even when concentrated firepower should have overwhelmed any ordinary warrior, he emerged unscathed, advancing relentlessly toward the squad. It became clear that standard weapons, even in lethal numbers, could not match the combination of force mastery, strategic foresight, and reflexive precision he wielded. Vader's lightsaber became more than a weapon. It was a tool of battlefield manipulation. The ceramite armor that protected every Marine could deflect his blade in theory, but in practice, his strikes targeted joints, gaps, and leverage points, amplified by telekinesis and force-enhanced strength. He could destabilize opponents without penetrating armor, use momentum against them, and strike with enough precision to neutralize without unnecessary injury or structural damage. Every movement was deliberate, efficient, and devastating, turning the supposed invincibility of Space Marine ceramite into a temporary obstacle rather than a barrier. As engagements continued, a pattern emerged. One-on-one combat, while dangerous, was survivable for most Marines. Small squads could be overwhelmed with precision and force augmentation. Medium squads, however, revealed the full scope of Vader's abilities. He coordinated the environment, manipulated the battlefield, anticipated enemy strategy, and neutralized threats before they could become effective. Tactical commentary would note that no standard Astartes doctrine could counter a force user of this caliber, and even elite captains and blade champions required exceptional foresight to survive a single encounter. By the end of these campaigns, the Imperium had learned a sobering lesson. Darth Vader was not merely a warrior, he was a tactical force multiplier, a being whose mastery of the Force, understanding of armor and weapons, and battlefield intuition rendered conventional resistance largely irrelevant. Ceramite armor, bolter fire, jump packs, and squad coordination, all formidable in their usual context, proved secondary to his ability to read, predict, and manipulate the flow of combat. Where one Marine might fail, 10 could not prevail. Where doctrine might succeed, instinct and force mastery ensured failure. And even in the presence of elite warriors, his dominance remained absolute, a singular manifestation of lethality and precision that the Imperium had never before encountered.
The 31st millennium had never witnessed a confrontation quite like this. Across battlefields strewn with the remnants of titanic conflicts, the sons of the Emperor, Primarchs of incomprehensible power, stood as the pinnacle of human martial perfection. Each one a legend, a living symbol of the Emperor's vision, and yet before them emerged a single figure, black-armored, breathing mechanically, moving with a precision and intensity that defied mortal comprehension. Darth Vader, once a servant of another galaxy's empire, now confronted the Imperium's greatest champions. Canon Vader's first engagements were calculated exercises in observation and restraint. Leman Russ, the Wolf King, charged with a fury born of Fenrisian legend, his great axe spinning arcs of lethal potential. Vader met the assault with measured defense, deflecting strikes with the lightsaber while applying subtle telekinetic nudges to unbalance the Primarch without committing to overextension. Russ's rage fueled his power, but Vader's predictive mastery allowed him to anticipate momentum, read intent, and redirect force with minimal energy expenditure. A single counterstrike sent Russ staggering, aware that his physical might alone was insufficient to overcome this alien combination of reflex, will, and mastery of the Force. Sanguinius, angelic and precise, demonstrated a speed and grace that few could match. His wings carried him across the battlefield with fluidity, his blade striking with almost preternatural timing. Vader sensed the purity of purpose within him, reading the currents of emotion, the balance of discipline and fury, and countered with the minimum necessary to test strength and reaction. The Force allowed Vader to predict attacks before they were executed, and his saber met Sanguinius's strikes with a hum that resonated across the battlefield. Each blow revealed the intricate dance between instinct, training, and the supernatural reflexes Vader possessed. Horus Lupercal, the War Master, presented a challenge of strategic brilliance. His mind, trained for command and manipulation, scanned Vader for weaknesses even as his blade sought to strike. Vader in turn probed Horus's intent with subtle telekinetic gestures, intercepting strikes, manipulating environment, and testing vulnerabilities in the Primarchs' responses. Horus adapted instantly, countering with a blend of martial genius and sheer physical ability. Yet Vader's capacity to anticipate outcomes, influenced by both Force precognition and tactical experience, allowed him to survive and counter with precision. Their duel became less a contest of raw strength and more a calculation of inevitability, each strike and parry a conversation in speed, timing, and perception. Magnus the Red, the Psyker Primarch, confronted Vader in a realm where the warp and the Force intertwined. Warp energy surged around Magnus, probing, testing, and attempting to influence. Vader, trained to sense the currents of the Force, met the psychic assault with mental discipline and telekinetic shielding. Spells, blasts, and psychic manipulations were deflected, neutralized, or redirected. Vader's understanding of energy flow allowed him to exploit moments of Magnus's overextension, finding openings in a battle where reality itself seemed fluid. Even a Primarch whose psychic might reshape the battlefield could not fully anticipate the singular fusion of Sith mastery and tactical precision that Vader wielded.
Angron, the Red Angel of Rage, charged with unbridled fury, chainsword swinging, body augmented beyond human limits. Vader met the assault with careful calculation, redirecting momentum through the Force, deflecting swings, and exploiting the brutal efficiency of the Primarch's anger against him. Angron's rage amplified strength, but also blinded precision. Vader used this, applying telekinetic nudges, counterweights, and subtle manipulations to destabilize balance. The duel was chaotic yet measured, demonstrating that physical might, even at Primarch levels, was not always sufficient when faced with foresight, strategy, and the subtle, overwhelming control of a Force user. Kurz, the Night Haunter, relied on terror and psychological manipulation, striking from shadows, anticipating fear and doubt. Vader's own mastery of fear, honed across decades as enforcer and executioner, allowed him to counter the Primarch's tactics. He neutralized ambushes, predicted attacks from unseen angles, and reflected the psychological assault back against Kurz, exposing the Night Haunter to the consequences of overconfidence and emotional manipulation. Every shadow was measured, every hesitation exploited. Vader's strategy was as much about manipulating the battlefield and the mind as it was about physical engagement. Beyond individual duels, Canon Vader's engagements revealed consistent patterns. Prediction, telekinesis, and psychological control magnified his combat effectiveness against beings even far stronger than the most elite Space Marine. Yet, when comparing Legends Vader, whose precognition, speed, and telekinesis reached near godlike levels, the calculus shifted. Legends Vader could challenge Primarchs at a level approaching parity in raw combat ability, anticipating attacks before intent fully formed, manipulating multiple adversaries simultaneously, and striking with impossible speed. While Canon Vader relied on precision and mastery of the battlefield, Legends Vader added layers of predictive foresight that made any engagement increasingly uncertain for even the most powerful Primarchs. Primarch reactions were diverse and revealing. Horus, ever calculating, recognized Vader as a being whose power was both alien and formidable, challenging his strategies without invoking fear. Sanguinius, understanding the discipline and focus required, respected the precision and predictiveness of Vader's style. Angron saw a reflection of fury channeled into control, an impossibility he could neither replicate nor dominate. Kurz regarded him with wary curiosity, noting the psychological equilibrium Vader maintained despite intimidation and chaos. Magnus, the master of sorcery, recognized the danger of a being whose understanding of unseen energies rivaled his own, yet whose physical skill remained unparalleled. Each Primarch assessed not only Vader's strength, but the philosophical implication, a being disciplined, controlled, and utterly lethal, whose alignment with the Imperium's order, or any master, could determine the fate of entire sectors. Vader's strategy in these engagements was meticulous. He exploited weaknesses, telekinetically manipulated mass and momentum, disrupted formations, and influenced emotions subtly. He recognized the value of psychological pressure, projecting inevitability through presence alone. Where one Primarch relied on rage, he measured restraint. Where one relied on strategy, he probed for missteps in anticipation. Where psychic might dominated, he countered with insight and shielding. Every duel became a study in tactical application, a combination of physical, psychic, and emotional control that extended the battlefield into multiple dimensions of engagement. By the end of this phase, it was evident Canon Vader could survive and engage Primarchs individually, exploiting gaps, leveraging telekinesis, and anticipating actions with deadly precision. Legends Vader, however, raised the stakes, challenging even the most formidable sons of the Emperor on multiple levels simultaneously. Yet the philosophical lesson remained consistent. Raw strength alone, no matter the magnitude, could not match the fusion of foresight, discipline, and calculated ruthlessness that Darth Vader brought to the 41st millennium.
The battles escalated beyond single confrontations. Vader now faced multiple Primarchs in coordinated engagements, testing the limits of prediction, strategy, and force mastery. The battlefield became a chessboard of titanic proportions, with beings whose strength, reflexes, and intellect dwarfed even the most elite space marines. Horus and Angron struck simultaneously, combining martial precision with raw fury, while Magnus and Sanguinius executed sweeping maneuvers that threatened to overwhelm any conventional opponent. Vader's response was a symphony of control. Telekinetic force fields redirected blows, environmental debris became projectiles, and predictive maneuvers allowed him to anticipate multiple attacks at once. Where one Primarch's strike could be blocked or redirected, two or more required a mastery of multi-temporal awareness, which the Force provided. Canon Vader's strategy relied on dividing and conquering. By subtly manipulating perceptions and exploiting psychological tendencies, he drew Primarchs into positions that maximized his control. Angron's rage, Magnus's psychic overreach, and Kurz's reliance on fear were all tools in his hands, to be anticipated and mitigated. Each strike, each maneuver served not merely to harm, but to guide the battlefield into configurations favorable to him. When Horus attempted to combine strategy and ferocity, Vader's insight allowed him to anticipate chain reactions, redirect momentum, and force the War Master into defensive positions. Even Sanguinius, whose grace and speed were unmatched, could not outmaneuver a Force user's awareness that encompassed both intent and consequence. Legends Vader elevated these engagements to a scale bordering on the mythical, His precognition extended beyond immediate combat, sensing the potential outcomes of every strike, parry, and counter simultaneously. He could anticipate Magnus's psychic assault while redirecting Angron's momentum and countering Horus's strategic strikes, all in a seamless flow of reaction and control. In this context, even the Primarch's extraordinary reflexes became secondary to the relentless inevitability of his actions. Legends Vader transformed the battlefield into a medium where raw power was channeled through perfect foresight, creating opportunities for domination that no conventional warrior, no matter how superhuman, could reliably counter. Reactions among the Primarchs reflected both awe and apprehension. Horus recognized a strategic mind whose intuition rivaled his own, forcing constant adaptation and caution. Sanguinius perceived the discipline and moral clarity underpinning Vader's lethal efficiency, acknowledging the impossibility of defeating him through raw talent alone. Magnus confronted a rival in the manipulation of unseen energies, recognizing that the Force and Warp, though distinct, could converge in tactical application with devastating effect. Angron's fury collided with an immovable presence, highlighting the limitations of unbridled rage against disciplined precision. Kurz found his psychological manipulation neutralized, revealing the unexpected resilience of Vader's focus and mental discipline. Each Primarch learned that power without foresight, or even mastery of a single domain, was insufficient when facing a being who integrated strategy, physical might, telekinesis, and psychological insight simultaneously. Philosophically, the confrontations were lessons in duality. Vader embodied both discipline and rage, loyalty and executioner's judgment. Against the Primarchs, he demonstrated that emotion, when controlled, could enhance rather than hinder action. Rage could be a tool, fear a weapon, and loyalty a conduit for efficiency. These moral contrasts fascinated and unsettled the sons of the Emperor. Where Kurz relied on terror, Vader projected inevitability. Where Angron relied on anger, Vader channeled precision. Where Magnus manipulated the warp, Vader manipulated intention and environment alike. His actions illustrated the delicate balance between morality and efficiency, emotion and control, chaos and order. Lessons not merely tactical, but philosophical, revealing a path to power few could comprehend. Vader's tactics exploited weaknesses in both physical and mental domains. Ceramite armor, designed to absorb kinetic and energy impacts, was rendered less effective against his combination of telekinesis and targeted strikes. He directed environmental hazards, debris, and energy with precision, exploiting joints, leverage points, and overextensions. Emotionally, he applied subtle pressure, sensing hesitation, overconfidence, or indecision, and translating these into tactical advantage. In engagements against multiple Primarchs, he forced overcommitment, misallocation of effort, and psychological strain, tipping battles in his favor even against overwhelmingly superior strength. The culmination of these encounters prepared Vader for the next stage, interaction with forces beyond even the Primarchs, the demons of the warp, the agents of chaos, and the unpredictability of galactic-scale conflict. Having tested the limits of human perfection, he had proven that strategy, force mastery, and psychological insight could allow a single individual to challenge the most formidable beings of the Imperium. Yet the universe offered greater threats than any Primarch could manifest alone. His experience now served as a foundation, a synthesis of prediction, martial skill, and philosophical understanding upon which he would confront entities that transcended physical combat entirely. By the end of these engagements, the verdict was clear.
Canon Vader could survive individual Primarch confrontations and manipulate the battlefield to his advantage, exploiting weaknesses and using telekinesis to reshape outcomes. Legends Vader raised the stakes further, challenging even multiple Primarchs simultaneously with near-perfect predictive control. The philosophical lesson endured. In the 41st millennium, raw strength and power were secondary to precision, foresight, and the integration of mind, body, and supernatural ability. Darth Vader had demonstrated that a being disciplined, adaptive, and lethal could not only survive, but dominate encounters with the Emperor's most powerful sons. Through these trials, he emerged as a tactical and philosophical anomaly, a figure capable of bridging worlds, mastering combat and strategy, and preparing for threats that exceeded even the legendary status of the Primarchs. His presence challenged the assumptions of the Imperium, revealed the limits of power, and established him as a singular agent whose mastery could influence not just the outcomes of battles, but the very nature of war in the grim darkness of the far future.
The warp, the psychic ocean of the galaxy, a turbulent sea of thought, emotion, and infinite possibility, pulsed with awareness. Darth Vader, once a master of the Force in another galaxy, now faced an entirely different dimension of power. Demonic whispers rose from the Imperium, tendrils of psychic energy probing, testing, seeking weaknesses. The creatures of chaos perceived him as both threat and anomaly, a being whose mastery of the Force mirrored their own manipulations, yet whose purpose and alignment were alien to the currents of the warp. Whispers became voices, voices became screams, yet Vader moved with a calm that transcended fear, intuition guiding him through psychic turbulence that would shatter lesser minds. Daemons of Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh approached, sensing a vessel of immense potential. Khorne's warborn surged, anticipating the spilling of blood and the eruption of fury. Tzeentch's manipulative wraiths twisted, offering visions of power, knowledge, and transformation. Slaanesh's temptation stroked at desire, hinting at pleasure beyond understanding. Each tested the limits of Vader's mind, probing for corruption, for opportunity, for surrender. Yet he withstood their psychic assaults, disciplined training, and the rigid focus of the Sith guiding him. His mind, honed to control fear, hate, and ambition, recognized the difference between the warp's seductive chaos and the Force's structured flow. He remained unbroken, a bulwark against corruption, even as the Imperium pressed at his soul. The Force and warp shared similarities, yet they diverged in critical ways. The Force, a universal current of energy, obeyed discipline, intent, and concentration. It could be shaped, extended, and manipulated, but required focus and equilibrium. The warp, by contrast, responded to emotion, instinct, and psychic resonance, often acting unpredictably and amplifying flaws or impulses. Vader, experienced in channeling rage, harnessing fear, and focusing the mind, applied the Force as a stabilizing counter to the warp's chaos. Psychic attacks that might unravel lesser psykers were met with shields of will and projection, telekinetic manipulation and mental fortitude that mirrored yet opposed the currents threatening to engulf him. Chaos sought to seduce him in myriad ways. A vision of galactic dominion was offered by Tzeentch, knowledge of the universe's deepest secrets, and manipulation of causality. Khorne tempted him with the ultimate release of rage and the spilling of blood, power unrestrained and endless. Slaanesh whispered of control over desire and will, sensations of mastery that extended beyond the physical. Vader's mind, however, rejected these siren calls. He evaluated the consequences of allegiance, the cost of corruption, the surrender of identity, the irreversibility of transformation into something inhuman.
His loyalty to purpose, even if redefined in this universe, served as his anchor. He was not a servant of chaos. He was a master of his own will. In one scenario, daemons of Khorne assaulted him on a devastated battlefield. Their hulking forms advanced with murderous intent, axes and claws designed to shred armor and flesh alike. Vader met them with a combination of lightsaber precision and telekinetic manipulation. He deflected blows that could have shattered ceramite, redirected momentum to disarm multiple attackers simultaneously, and struck with concentrated energy focused on nerve clusters and vulnerable joints. Each daemon's attack was anticipated, countered, and redirected, leaving them incapacitated rather than destroyed, a testament to his ability to channel force discipline in a universe where the warp threatened to overwhelm him. Against Tzeentchian trickery, the battle shifted to the psychic plane. Warp illusions, shifting realities, and manipulations of causality tested his perception. Vader extended the Force into a shield of awareness, countering deceptive energies, stabilizing his senses, and exploiting moments of overreach. Each psychic attack revealed vulnerabilities in the attacker's strategy, which he exploited with a combination of foresight and telekinetic precision. Even when reality itself bent and shifted, he maintained clarity of thought, grounding himself in discipline and purpose. The seduction of Slaanesh took subtler forms: emotional manipulation, temptation, and promises of ultimate mastery over instinct and sensation. Vader perceived these not as pleasures to indulge, but as tools to anticipate action. Desire, when unbalanced, often led to mistakes. By maintaining emotional equilibrium, he avoided being influenced, turning the adversary's expectations against them. Every approach, every lure, every whisper became a potential tactical advantage, demonstrating that understanding the nature of corruption could be as lethal as mastery of arms. Despite these demonstrations of strength, the question remained: what if he had embraced chaos? The scenario of transformation into a daemon prince was as vivid as it was terrifying. Alignment with Khorne would have amplified his rage and martial skill to godlike levels, yet at the cost of identity, free will, and subtlety. Tzeentch's patronage could grant manipulation of fate and reality, but his mind would become a battlefield of conflicting destinies. Slaanesh offered perfection in control and sensation, yet demanded obsession and surrender of self. Each path presented ultimate power with ultimate cost, a surrender Vader could not reconcile and therefore did not pursue. His moral calculus in this universe became as significant as his physical mastery. By rejecting chaos, he affirmed his discipline, his loyalty to a higher purpose, and his commitment to control rather than surrender. To serve chaos was to amplify power at the cost of humanity, reason, and foresight. To resist was to embrace struggle, discipline, and the potential for mastery without surrender. In this grimdark universe, where corruption was omnipresent, his choice established him not merely as a warrior, but as an agent capable of surviving and shaping conflict without losing self to the Imperium's temptations. By the end of these trials, it was clear: the daemons of the warp, masters of seduction, rage, and manipulation, could not sway him. Vader had navigated the storm of the Imperium, applying force mastery to counter the unpredictable currents of the warp. He emerged uncorrupted, his mind and purpose intact, a singular entity whose discipline, strength, and foresight allowed him to confront chaos itself without bending to it. Yet, the universe remained vast, and the lessons of this confrontation would echo in the battles to come, for even a master of the Force must respect the infinite and unpredictable tides of the warp. The battlefield shifted from the material to the psychic, a realm where reality bent under the will of the warp, and demonic entities moved with a grace and purpose impossible to perceive for mortal minds. Here, Darth Vader's mastery of the Force became his anchor. Each step into this liminal space revealed the full scale of chaos's temptation, the screams of billions of lost souls, the distorted visions of impossible futures, the promise of omnipotence in exchange for surrender. The daemons pressed closer, drawn to him as a force anomaly, a being whose discipline rivaled their own and whose potential threatened their dominance. Khorne's champions, massive and furious, surged forward with weapons designed to tear reality itself apart. Every strike was a test of rage against discipline. Vader met the onslaught with a combination of telekinetic shielding and lethal precision. Bolts of crimson energy sparked as his sightsaber deflected enormous axes, while the Force redirected the momentum of charging daemons, hurling them into each other or into walls of psychic energy he conjured. Every blow absorbed, every movement anticipated, demonstrated that the raw fury of Khorne's followers, though immense, was no match for a mind disciplined in both combat and focus. Rage, uncontrolled and amplified, became a vulnerability, a lever Vader exploited effortlessly. Tzeentchian entities attacked differently, reshaping reality, warping perceptions, and conjuring impossible geometries to confuse and trap. Magnus himself would recognize such manipulations as distant cousins of psychic power. Yet Vader's mastery of the Force allowed him to anchor his perception. Time, causality, and spatial orientation bent and twisted, but he remained centered. Every anomaly became predictable, every manipulation a tool to anticipate and counter enemy moves. Telekinesis lifted demonic constructions, redirected psychic blasts, and disrupted the chaotic weave of their assault. Even entities that reshaped reality found their actions neutralized before they could take effect, a testament to Vader's unique adaptation to this universe's psychic forces. Slanesh's temptations tested him differently, probing emotional weaknesses, desires, and obsessions. The whispers promised control beyond comprehension, mastery of sensation, and omniscience over mortal will. Vader recognized them for what they were: distractions, manipulations meant to unbalance, to exploit ego and pride. With unwavering discipline, he reframed desire as tactical insight, focus as defense, and temptation as opportunity. Each psychic probe became a signal of intent, allowing him to anticipate and counter, to strike with precision against a foe whose tools were subtle, invisible, and insidious. Emotional manipulation was rendered irrelevant by focus. Pleasure became strategy, and seduction became anticipation. The extreme scenario, becoming a daemon prince, presented a choice of ultimate power at ultimate cost. Khorne's path would amplify rage and combat strength to godlike levels, but destroy the essence of Vader's self-discipline. Tzeentch offered mastery over fate and reality, yet would corrode free will and warp perception until identity was lost. Slanesh promised perfection in sensation and control, but demanded obsession and surrender to compulsions beyond comprehension. Each path demonstrated the ultimate trade-off: power gained, humanity lost. Vader analyzed, calculated, and ultimately rejected each offer, understanding that control over oneself was more valuable than dominion granted by corruption. His mastery of the Force provided a power that could counter chaos without surrender, proving that discipline could rival divine aberration. Vader's tactics evolved under extreme conditions. He manipulated the battlefield not only physically but psychically,
using the Force to anchor reality around him, redirect kinetic and psychic energy, and stabilize allies against chaos incursions. He anticipated Daemon's strategies, using predictive insight to counter multiple entities simultaneously. The combination of physical, psychic, and strategic mastery allowed him to neutralize threats even when outnumbered or faced with attacks that would annihilate ordinary warriors. Every engagement became a lesson in balance, focus, and moral clarity. The disciplined mind could survive and dominate where unchecked power failed. The moral consequences of resistance were profound. By rejecting chaos, Vader preserved his identity, maintained control, and ensured the ability to act in accordance with his chosen purpose. To serve chaos was to gain power, yes, but at the expense of autonomy, morality, and foresight. To resist was to embrace struggle, accept risk, and rely on skill and discipline. His choice illustrated a central principle of the 41st millennium. Ultimate power carries ultimate cost, and only those who balance strength with self-mastery can endure. In a universe where corruption is omnipresent, survival and effectiveness are inseparable from moral and psychological resilience. Even in the presence of overwhelming odds, Vader's mastery of force and discipline allowed him to counter the most formidable daemons without succumbing. Khorne's fury was channeled and redirected, Tzeentch's manipulations anticipated and neutralized, and Slaanesha's temptations rendered ineffective. He emerged not as a servant of chaos, but as a master of his environment, a singular being capable of surviving and shaping conflict against entities designed to overwhelm the mind, body, and soul. The lessons were clear and universal. The Force could oppose the warp, discipline could counter temptation, and focus could overcome the infinite chaos of the Imperium. Vader had confronted the very essence of corruption, the ultimate tests of will, and emerged unbroken. Yet the universe remained vast, threats endless, and the daemons of the warp would not forget. Every encounter, every engagement, every choice reinforced his position not merely as a warrior, but as an agent capable of shaping the battlefield, the psyche, and the moral fabric of the 41st millennium itself. In conclusion, this chapter cemented Vader as a figure of paradoxical mastery, capable of wielding power beyond comprehension, resisting the most insidious forms of corruption, and remaining disciplined in a universe designed to destroy such focus. The choice between ultimate power and self-mastery defined him, illustrating that in the grim darkness, survival is won not only through strength, but through control, foresight, and the moral clarity to resist even the most seductive temptations of chaos.
The galaxy itself seemed to shift as Darth Vader confronted the myriad enemies of the Imperium. Unlike Space Marines or even Primarchs, these adversaries operated on scales and principles entirely alien to him. The Necrons, ancient and unfeeling, emerged from their tomb worlds with relentless precision. Each movement was predetermined, each volley of gauss fire calculated with machine-like inevitability. Vader's first encounter took place on a world of shattered monoliths and pulsating energy conduits, the air shimmering with the latent power of technologies older than most human history. The Necron warriors moved without hesitation, their weapons firing beams capable of disintegrating ceramite armor. Yet Vader's mastery of the Force, combined with his tactical acumen, allowed him to deflect gauss fire, manipulate battlefield debris, and anticipate the Necrons' movements in a dance of survival and offense. Each strike of his lightsaber intercepted weapons mid-flight,
Each telekinetic push turned enemy units into obstacles for one another. The calculated lethality of the Necrons met its first real challenge, an entity whose speed, foresight, and ability to manipulate matter rivaled their own. Vader's combat was both offensive and strategic. He did not merely survive against these ancient warriors, he exploited the predictable aspects of their patterns. While Necrons were relentless, their precision was inflexible. Vader used environmental hazards, collapsing ruins, and gravitational shifts to slow, isolate, and neutralize entire units. He redirected energy blasts to disrupt synchronized fire, forcing the machines to expend power inefficiently. Even the Necron Overlord, surrounded by a legion of warriors, found itself countered by the combined force of Vader's telekinetic manipulation, lightsaber precision, and battlefield awareness. The encounter was a lesson in adaptation. When fighting a foe without fear or instinct, prediction, control, and environmental mastery became paramount. The Tyranid swarms introduced a different kind of threat. Unlike the disciplined Necrons, Tyranids operated as living predators, instinctive, adaptive, and relentless in pursuit of biomass. Their numbers were overwhelming, a tidal wave of chitin, talons, and acidic weaponry. Vader's initial observation revealed the key to survival: exploit pattern recognition within chaos. He anticipated the swarming tactics, using the Force to redirect creatures into each other, creating choke points and manipulating terrain to fragment the swarm. His lightsaber became a rotating blade of destruction, cutting through Tyranid masses with precision rather than brute force. Telekinesis lifted, hurled, and pinned attackers, while environmental debris was converted into defensive fortifications. Each move was economical, a study in efficiency and lethal foresight. Tyranid bioforms attempted to overwhelm him with numbers and unpredictability. A Tyranid hive tyrant struck from above, tentacles and psychic blasts testing his reflexes and mental discipline. Vader countered with a combination of anticipatory strikes and force shielding, redirecting kinetic energy and exploiting the creature's momentum against itself. Even the psychic assaults of the Tyranids, though potent, were mitigated by his mental fortitude and the Force's stabilizing influence. By the end of the engagement, the Tyranids learned the danger of underestimating a single being capable of manipulating both battlefield and swarms simultaneously. Beyond individual combat, Vader began to assess galactic-scale strategy. The Imperium's enemies were diverse, vast, and fundamentally different in nature. Each required a unique approach. The predictable yet unrelenting Necrons, the instinctive and adaptive Tyranids, the chaotic Orcs, the technologically sophisticated Tau, and the elusive Eldar. Understanding these dynamics became critical. Against Necrons, control and precision. Against Tyranids, anticipation and environmental manipulation. Vader recognized that his mastery of the Force allowed him to integrate reconnaissance, battlefield manipulation, and combat efficiency on a scale far beyond human command structures. Where Space Marine chapters relied on training, doctrine, and numbers, Vader relied on perception, prediction, and the Force as both shield and weapon. Orc encounters loomed on the horizon, and the possibilities were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Wogs, the rolling tides of green-skinned savagery, depended on sheer numbers, noise, and chaos. Yet Vader's strategy remained consistent: study patterns, anticipate movement, exploit weaknesses. A single gesture of the Force could redirect the momentum of dozens of charging Orcs, lifting debris and creating barriers, while his lightsaber cleaved a path through the densest formations. He could become, in effect, a war boss, not by biology or birthright, but by domination of battlefield dynamics, turning the Orcs' chaos against themselves. His presence alone would inspire awe and fear, converting instinct into obedience and unpredictability into tactical advantage. Tau and Eldar presented challenges of technology and stealth. The Tau offered advanced weaponry capable of piercing even ceramite, while Eldar used psychic finesse, speed, and misdirection. Vader's approach combined predictive analysis, the Force's sensory augmentation, and his understanding of technology. Tau enhancements to his suit, energy shielding, targeting augmentation, and adaptive sensors could be integrated with Force manipulation, creating a synthesis of machine and mysticism. Against Eldar, stealth and psychic confrontation demanded even greater discipline, anticipating ambushes, reading intent, and countering psychic intrusion while moving at speeds sufficient to intercept attackers before they could act. By the end of these campaigns, a pattern was evident. Vader was not merely a fighter, but a tactical force multiplier, capable of analyzing, anticipating, and controlling engagements at multiple scales. Whether facing immortal machines, instinct-driven swarms, or cunning psychers, he applied the Force as a stabilizer and amplifier, integrating strategy with combat in a way no human general could match. His ability to project presence, influence environment, and manipulate opponents made him a galactic-level threat, capable of surviving and dominating even when the odds were astronomical.
The thunder of green war cries echoed across shattered worlds as Darth Vader confronted the Orc Wa. Unlike the disciplined Necrons or instinct-driven Tyranids, the Orcs thrived on chaos, sheer numbers, and the unpredictable rhythm of battle. Their forces surged like tidal waves, bristling with crude yet devastating weaponry, reinforced by psychically amplified belief in their own unstoppable might. Vader assessed the battlefield with calm precision. He recognized that control, rather than brute force alone, was the key to turning disorder into advantage. A single gesture of the Force could topple dozens of charging orcs, redirect momentum, and funnel them into kill zones where lightsaber strikes and environmental hazards compounded their losses. Every swing, every push, every pull transformed their overwhelming numbers into predictable flows he could manipulate. In the midst of battle, Vader became a war boss by presence alone, his armor black and imposing, his lightsaber humming with lethal authority. He projected inevitability. Orcs, whose loyalty was traditionally guided by strength and charisma, instinctively deferred to him. Those who charged were redirected by telekinetic force or cleaved in disciplined arcs, while those who observed hesitated, uncertainty seeping into their normally chaotic coordination. His mastery of the Force amplified his aura, and within moments what had been an uncontrollable Wa now moved like a formation under his command. Every orc transformed from wild aggression into a tool for strategic advantage. Where orcs once relied on random luck and brutal instinct, Vader imposed structure, and even their own war instincts served his designs. The Tau presented a different challenge entirely. Their technology rivaled the most advanced Imperial designs. Adaptive armor, railguns, energy shields, and battlefield analytics that exceeded human comprehension. Vader's approach relied on integration rather than confrontation. He absorbed technological enhancements into his combat strategy, allowing them to augment his armor's capabilities, energy shielding, and targeting systems. Even with these upgrades, he relied on force prediction and telekinetic manipulation to anticipate attacks, disrupt coordination, and intercept volleys before they could reach him. Against the Tau, success depended on harmonizing machine and mysticism. translating advanced weaponry as an extension of his natural skill, rather than a replacement for it. Eldar and Dark Eldar, masters of stealth, psychic warfare, and speed, introduced new dimensions of threat. Webway incursions, ambushes, and rapid strikes tested not only reflex, but perception itself. Vader countered by extending the Force into his senses, feeling intent, detecting shifts in movement, and anchoring his presence to the battlefield. Every trap, every feint, every psychic probe became a signal of intent, a chance to strike preemptively. His lightsaber danced in near-instant reactions. Telekinesis redirected attacks before they occurred, and his understanding of tactical psychology neutralized even the most subtle of Eldar manipulations. Where speed, stealth, and psychic cunning combined, Vader imposed inevitability, turning surprise into opportunity, misdirection into predictability.
Beyond individual encounters, Vader began to view conflict on a galactic scale. He assessed the strengths, weaknesses, and interplay of every major threat. Orcs as tools of chaos harnessed to structure. Tau as technological rivals integrated into enhancement. Eldar as psychic predators countered with foresight. He considered planetary destruction, fleet engagements, and the interrelation of forces across entire systems. The Force, telekinesis, and predictive insight allowed him to simulate outcomes, manipulate engagements before they occurred, and act preemptively in ways that no human general could achieve. Imperial command structures, vast and often rigid, relied on doctrine. Vader relied on perception, prediction, and control. The orchestration of multiple factions revealed his unique role in the 41st millennium. Against orcs, he exploited belief and momentum. Against Tau, he integrated technology into his abilities. Against Eldar, he anticipated psychic and physical manipulation. Against Tyranids and Necrons, he harmonized telekinesis, precision, and environmental manipulation. In every case, survival and victory depended on anticipation, adaptation, and control, not merely overwhelming force. Vader's mastery of battlefield dynamics allowed him to confront threats that no ordinary Astartes, let alone human commander, could manage. In galactic-scale engagements, he acted almost like a singular strategic entity. Entire fleets, planetary defenses, and ground forces became extensions of his perception. He predicted enemy movements, redirected attacks, and neutralized threats before they fully manifested. His combination of physical mastery, telekinetic power, and strategic foresight allowed him to operate simultaneously on multiple scales: individual combat, squad-level engagement, and planetary strategy. The Imperium's enemies were vast, yet none could anticipate or counter the fusion of force, intellect, and disciplined lethality Vader embodied. By the conclusion of these campaigns, the picture was clear. Vader could survive and dominate encounters across the spectrum of galactic factions. Orcs could be turned into controlled forces, Tyranids fragmented and manipulated, Eldar ambushes neutralized by predictive foresight. His mastery of the Force allowed him to act as both shield and spear, controller and executioner. The 41st millennium, vast and merciless, revealed itself not as an insurmountable threat, but as a proving ground for Vader's discipline, foresight, and tactical genius. In every engagement, he learned, adapted, and imposed his will. He became not merely a warrior, but a strategic anomaly, capable of orchestrating survival and victory against enemies whose scale, power, and unpredictability would overwhelm ordinary mortals. The galaxy itself seemed to bend around his presence, a singular agent whose mastery of force, combat, and strategy allowed him to confront the full spectrum of threats in the grim darkness and emerge not merely alive, but dominant. Darth Vader's arrival in the Imperium of Man did not merely alter the battlefield, it redefined the concept of Imperial enforcement. Where Inquisitors wielded authority through investigation, coercion, and execution, Vader embodied the synthesis of martial prowess, psychic mastery, and unwavering will. His presence alone imposed compliance. The mere sight of his black armor, the mechanical rhythm of his breathing, the ominous glow of his lightsaber communicated inevitability. The Emperor's will, abstract to most mortals, became tangible in him. He was judge, executor, and enforcer combined, a living instrument of the Imperium's unyielding authority. Comparisons to established enforcers illuminated his singularity. Lord Inquisitors relied on bureaucracy, covert operations, and ritualized intimidation. Vader required neither. Grey Knights, empowered to combat demonic entities, matched his psychic potential, yet lacked his combination of telekinesis, martial mastery, and battlefield adaptation. Custodes, the Emperor's personal warriors, excelled in loyalty, discipline, and physical prowess, yet their numbers were finite and their influence limited to ceremonial and defensive roles. Vader, however, merged the qualities of all three: loyalty to purpose, adaptability in combat, psychic discipline, and the capacity to act as both individual warrior and strategic overseer. In every sense, he was a new class of agent, one whose presence reshaped the execution of the Emperor's will across multiple scales. Tactical campaigns under his direction became exemplars of efficiency. Heretical cults, once entrenched across multiple worlds, found themselves confronted by an entity capable of instantaneous deployment, predictive analysis, and lethal precision. Vader's method combined the subtlety of psychological manipulation with the immediacy of lethal enforcement. A heretic might sense his presence moments before he struck, the Force enabling him to anticipate resistance, trap escapees, and neutralize threats without relying solely on brute force. Entire cult networks collapsed under his interventions, not merely from physical destruction, but from the inevitability his aura projected, a sense that resistance was both futile and irrelevant. Demonic incursions, long the scourge of the Imperium, presented a more complex challenge. Vader's experience with the warp, telekinesis, and lightsaber mastery allowed him to confront demons with precision and efficiency. Unlike most Imperial agents, whose psychic capacity was limited and often destructive to themselves, Vader could channel the Force as both shield and weapon, countering demonic manipulations, closing warp rifts, and disrupting summoning rituals. A single engagement could neutralize multiple entities, prevent corruption, and stabilize the affected area, demonstrating that his mastery extended beyond conventional combat into the psychic and metaphysical domains. Xenos threats were similarly addressed with strategic ingenuity. Orc warbands, Tyranid incursions, and Tau tactical deployments were met not only with physical might, but with battlefield orchestration. Vader anticipated swarm movements, predicted enemy firing patterns, and manipulated terrain and forces through Force-enhanced perception. The Force augmented both strategy and execution, allowing him to operate simultaneously as commander and frontline operative. Imperial generals, accustomed to relying on vast numbers in artillery, observed as Vader achieved victories that conventional doctrine deemed improbable, if not impossible. Interactions with high-ranking Imperium figures were as revealing as battlefield exploits. High Lords of Terra, while accustomed to rigid hierarchy and political maneuvering, recognized in Vader an instrument that transcended conventional obedience. Malkader the Sigillate, whose insight into the warp and imperial politics was unparalleled, studied him as both asset and anomaly. Vader's loyalty, honed under the tutelage of Palpatine, was now repurposed, directed toward the Emperor's vision rather than galactic domination. This shift in allegiance was not instantaneous. It required psychological recalibration, the replacement of Sith devotion with Imperial pragmatism, and the realignment of purpose from personal power to execution of a higher will. Vader's psychological adaptation was a subtle, continuous process. Memories of servitude to Palpatine, the compulsions of rage, and the rigid doctrines of the Sith were not erased, but reframed. Where ambition had guided him, now duty, inevitability, and the mandate of the Emperor structured action. His rage, once an instrument of conquest, became a tool of enforcement and precision. His fear, once a catalyst for domination, now reinforced discipline and anticipation. In effect, Vader's entire psychological architecture was repurposed. The Sith's dark rigor was reshaped into the Imperium's lethal instrumentality. This transformation extended to interpersonal dynamics. Astarte's commanders, accustomed to operating within strict codices, found themselves observing a being whose loyalty was absolute, but whose methods defied convention. Imperial officials, bureaucrats, and planetary governors saw both threat and protection in him, a singular enforcer who could bypass procedural inertia while still upholding the Emperor's mandates. Vader's presence was simultaneously stabilizing and terrifying, a tangible embodiment of the Imperium's uncompromising authority. Even in the minutiae of campaign planning, Vader excelled. Supply lines, reconnaissance, planetary deployment, and strike sequencing were augmented by force-enhanced foresight. Anticipating enemy movements, environmental conditions, and the psychological state of adversaries allowed him to execute operations with precision unattainable by conventional command structures. Whether hunting a single heretic or coordinating planetary defense against multiple Xenos threats, Vader operated as a multi-layered agent of the Emperor, psychic shield, tactical commander, frontline executor, and moral enforcer, all in one. By the end of these early campaigns, Vader's role as an Imperial agent was undeniable. He had integrated his Sith training, force mastery, and martial skill into the Imperium's machinery of war. His psychological adaptation from servant to Palpatine to servant of the Emperor allowed him to act with lethal efficiency while remaining aligned with a new purpose. Across the galaxy, Imperial and enemy alike began to recognize a singular truth. Where Darth Vader appeared, the Emperor's will was absolute, inevitable, and inescapable.
Once fully integrated into the mechanisms of the Imperium, Darth Vader's role expanded from tactical enforcer to strategic executor of the Emperor's will. His campaigns were not isolated engagements. They were coordinated, multi-level operations spanning entire planetary systems. On worlds overrun by heretics, he struck with precision, targeting cult leadership, neutralizing psychic nodes, and dismantling support networks before any widespread resistance could coalesce. Every movement was calculated, every strike deliberate. Vader's understanding of human behavior, honed over decades under the dark tutelage of Palpatine, allowed him to anticipate deceit, fear, and ambition, turning them into tools to destabilize opponents before physical confrontation became necessary. Against demonic incursions, Vader's influence became legendary. Entire warp-tainted sectors, where ordinary Astartes and Imperial psychers faltered, found themselves confronted by a single agent capable of resisting psychic corruption while simultaneously dismantling it. He closed rifts,
dispersed daemons, and sealed corruption points with a combination of telekinetic manipulation, lightsaber precision, and psychological dominance. Where Grey Knights relied on psychic power to match warp entities in battle, Vader integrated both physical and psychic discipline, applying the Force to reinforce his body, stabilize the environment, and manipulate enemy momentum. Each engagement was not just a fight, it was an orchestration of control over the battlefield, the enemy, and the unseen currents of the warp. Xenos campaigns demonstrated a similar fusion of strategy and execution. Orc warbands, normally unpredictable and overwhelming in size, were rendered controllable through Vader's manipulation of belief and battlefield momentum. Tyrannid swarms, adaptive and relentless, were segmented, funneled, and redirected, turning their own instincts into vulnerabilities. Tau deployments, reliant on technological coordination, faced disruption through Vader's predictive analysis and integration of advanced systems into his operational flow. Even Eldar strikes, leveraging stealth and psychic manipulation, were countered by Force-augmented perception and anticipatory strikes. In every case, Vader demonstrated that his adaptation to the 41st millennium had elevated him from warrior to strategic anomaly, capable of orchestrating victory where conventional doctrine would fail. Vader's psychological evolution became increasingly evident in extreme circumstances. Encounters with massive heretic uprisings, psychic storms, and Xenos incursions forced him to reconcile his Sith conditioning with the Imperial's rigid structure. Where once rage had guided his hand, he now applied it selectively, as a tool of focus rather than impulsion. Fear, formerly a weapon to manipulate others, was reframed as a source of tactical awareness, heightening sensitivity to danger and enemy intent. Loyalty, previously pledged to a master of the dark side, was redirected toward a higher, abstract principle, the Emperor's vision. This shift did not erase Vader's past, it incorporated it, transforming his motivations into a hybrid of discipline, duty, and lethal pragmatism. Interactions with Imperial High Command further reinforced this evolution. Malkador observed Vader not as a subordinate, but as a specialized instrument of will, capable of executing objectives beyond the comprehension of conventional generals. Astartes commanders witnessed a being who could lead entire chapters not merely through orders, but by demonstrating inevitability, actions that inspired obedience through both awe and fear. Where bureaucracy often delayed action, Vader acted decisively, executing campaigns that balanced strategic foresight with instantaneous battlefield response. He became a singular node of authority, blending psychic mastery, martial skill, and operational command into a coherent instrument of Imperial power. The orchestration of entire systems revealed another dimension, philosophical integration. Vader's understanding of the Imperial's moral architecture, its emphasis on loyalty, devotion, and survival amidst constant war, reshaped his sense of purpose. The dark pragmatism of the Sith aligned naturally with the grim realities of the 41st millennium. Yet it was tempered by the Imperial's emphasis on service over ambition. Rage and fear, once tools of personal dominance, were now instruments to enforce order, combat heresy, and maintain stability. The lessons of this universe, perpetual war, corruption, and the fragility of human systems, were internalized and integrated into his tactical calculus. Every campaign reinforced this transformation. Worlds previously lost to heresy were reclaimed, daemon incursions quelled, Xenos threats neutralized, and Imperial authority extended through a combination of fear, respect, and undeniable effectiveness. Vader's presence became a symbol, the Emperor's will manifested in flesh and steel, unstoppable in combat, unwavering in purpose, and unmatched in psychological influence. Ordinary troops, commanders, and even entire populations recognized the inevitability he embodied. Resistance was both futile and irrelevant. Compliance was immediate, for the shadow of Vader carried both judgment and action. By the conclusion of his early tenure as an Imperial agent, Darth Vader had achieved a synthesis unprecedented in human history. Sith mastery repurposed for service, Force power integrated into Imperial strategy, psychological insight applied to galactic-scale campaigns. He was no longer merely a warrior. He was a multi-dimensional executor of will, simultaneously enforcing law, combating heresy, neutralizing warp threats, and coordinating strategy across planetary systems. Where others relied on doctrine, numbers, or ritual, Vader relied on perception, foresight, and the inexorable certainty of his purpose. The transformation was complete. Vader had become the ultimate instrument of the Imperium, disciplined, decisive, and unyielding. His loyalty, once tethered to Palpatine, now served a higher purpose. His rage, once a weapon of personal dominance, now enforced order. And his presence, in any theater of war, communicated a singular truth. The Emperor's will was absolute, and Darth Vader was its perfect executor. In the grim darkness of the far future, where millions perished daily and corruption lurked in every shadow, one being had proven that power, discipline, and moral recalibration could turn an agent of destruction into a force of unmatched control and inevitability.
In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the arrival of Darth Vader had already begun to reshape warfare and authority. Yet a second, far more potent question emerged. What if the galaxy faced not merely Canon Vader, disciplined, powerful, and relentless, but Legends Vader, an entity whose abilities, mastery of the Force, and precognitive insight far exceeded any mortal or Astartes understanding? The difference was not subtle. Canon Vader, formidable and terrifying, relied on the integration of Force mastery, lightsaber skill, and tactical foresight. Legends Vader magnified each attribute exponentially. Speed, perception, telekinesis, and precognition reached levels that defied conventional understanding, allowing him to anticipate movements before they were conceived, strike with lethal precision at impossible distances, and manipulate the physical and psychic environment simultaneously. Legends Vader's speed was a phenomenon unto itself. Where Canon Vader moved with mechanical precision and force-enhanced reflexes, Legends Vader appeared almost as a blur across battlefields. Bolter rounds, laser cannon blasts, and Tyranid bio-projectiles were intercepted with an ease that made time appear to dilate around him. Tactical Marines, even in fully ceramite armor, found their attacks anticipated, parried, or neutralized before they could strike. In engagements with entire squads, Legends Vader's ability to predict, intercept, and redirect movements created a battlefield where enemy actions were nullified before they became threats. This was not merely reaction, it was the application of precognition amplified to near godlike levels, allowing him to operate simultaneously on multiple tactical fronts. Telekinesis, too, reached unprecedented magnitude. Canon Vader's abilities allowed him to manipulate objects, redirect projectiles, and restrain enemies with formidable efficiency.
Legends Vader expanded this to planetary scales. Entire terrain features could be shifted to create choke points, orbital debris redirected as weapons, and the momentum of enemy forces inverted in mid-strike. Against Tyranid swarms, he could lift and fragment entire sections of the horde, effectively rewriting swarm dynamics with minimal effort. Against Necron legions, he could disrupt synchronized fire patterns, redirect Gauss discharges, and collapse structures to isolate and destroy warriors en masse. Telekinesis became both offense and defense, integrated into every aspect of battlefield strategy. Precognition elevated Legends Vader from master tactician to near-omniscient warrior, where Canon Vader predicted enemy movements based on observation and force intuition. Legends Vader saw potential outcomes before they unfolded. This allowed him to anticipate ambushes, counter psychic assaults, and exploit psychological vulnerabilities of both mortals and Primarchs. Even chaos entities, accustomed to manipulating perception and probability, found themselves neutralized by a being whose foresight extended into the currents of fate itself. Every strike was preemptive, every maneuver decisive, and every engagement effectively predetermined in his favor. Combat outcomes changed radically under Legends Vader's presence. Tactical Marines, once a credible threat in squads or platoons, were overwhelmed before coordination could be established. Astartes chapter leaders, accustomed to battlefield dominance, found themselves manipulated, disarmed, or neutralized with a combination of speed, precision, and force-induced control. Primarchs, the very apex of mortal power in the Imperium, faced challenges they had never imagined. While Canon Vader might engage, test, or prolong a duel, Legends Vader anticipated weaknesses, exploited emotional vulnerabilities, and countered every offensive maneuver with preternatural efficacy. The battlefield itself became an extension of his will, where terrain, enemy action, and environmental factors were all manipulated to ensure dominance. Narrative scenarios suggested unprecedented possibilities. Could Legends Vader challenge the Emperor? While the Emperor's own psychic and martial capabilities were unparalleled, Legends Vader approached levels of speed, telekinesis, and precognition that allowed him to contest even such a being indirectly. In duels, manipulation of the environment, control of psychic currents, and anticipatory strikes might force engagements into stalemates, psychological contests, or limited victories where victory was measured not in destruction but in strategic advantage. The Emperor, accustomed to calculating outcomes across millennia, would confront a being whose actions were near impossible to anticipate fully, creating a tension rarely experienced in the 41st millennium. Faction responses to Legends Vader were equally extraordinary. Chaos entities, sensing a being whose precognition countered the warp's manipulation, became wary, cautious, or outright hesitant. Demons that had previously relied on instinct, temptation, and manipulation found themselves neutralized before they could act. Primarchs, confronted with a combatant capable of matching reflexes, strength, and strategy, were forced to reconsider engagement protocols, alliances, and the application of their own abilities. Grey Knights, the Emperor's demonic specialists, recognized a peer in discipline and psychic control. Yet even they found their predictive strategies challenged by a being whose foresight extended beyond conventional psychic capacity. Every engagement underscored a singular truth. Legends Vader did not merely participate in conflict, he reshaped the parameters of conflict. The integration of amplified speed, precognition, telekinesis, and strategic insight created a battlefield where outcomes were no longer determined by conventional strength, numbers, or experience. Instead, they were dictated by the will and mastery of a singular entity capable of harmonizing every aspect of combat into a coherent, unstoppable force. By the conclusion of these initial observations, the Imperium faced a reality both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Canon Vader was already a formidable agent, capable of enforcing the Emperor's will across the galaxy. Legends Vader, however, represented a qualitative leap, a force whose presence could redefine entire campaigns, neutralize the most elite warriors, and challenge even the most potent psychic and martial entities in the 41st millennium. The implications for strategy, hierarchy, and factional interaction were profound, reshaping not merely battles, but the philosophical understanding of power, inevitability, and the application of discipline in a universe defined by war.
Legends Vader's arrival on a 41st millennium battlefield altered every conceivable dynamic. Where Canon Vader engaged in duels with tactical marines or challenged Primarchs individually, Legends Vader operated simultaneously on multiple scales, integrating psychic anticipation, physical mastery, and battlefield orchestration in a way no mortal or enhanced human could counter. Even the most disciplined Space Marine commanders found themselves reacting to strikes before they were conceived, while squads of Grey Knights, trained to confront demonic entities, were forced into defensive postures against a single figure whose precognition rivaled their collective foresight. Against Primarchs, Legends Vader introduced unprecedented complications. Horus, the War Master of Chaos, renowned for his tactical genius and combat prowess, confronted an adversary capable of reading his intentions instantaneously, redirecting his strikes, and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. In a duel, Legends Vader did not simply parry, he anticipated, adapted, and manipulated the flow of battle, turning Horus's own aggression and tactical brilliance into liabilities. Sanguinius, whose angelic speed and combat intuition were legendary, faced a foe whose acceleration and predictive skill exceeded even his own reflexes, forcing engagements into scenarios where each strike and maneuver were countered before fully initiated. Guilliman, master strategist and tactician, confronted the limitation of planning in real time. Every decision could be anticipated and preempted, reducing strategic superiority to a contest of endurance and improvisation. Angron, driven by rage and unrestrained ferocity, found his strengths neutralized by Legends Vader's ability to read emotional impulses and redirect kinetic energy. Kurz, whose precognition normally allowed him to foresee threats across decades, was forced to confront a being whose foresight extended into multiple potential futures simultaneously, rendering traditional predictive techniques unreliable. Magnus the Red, with his immense psychic power, attempted to challenge Legends Vader on the psychic plane, only to encounter a force wielder whose control, speed, and mental fortitude rivaled even the most potent psychers of the Imperium. Each Primarch, despite centuries of combat experience, realized that Legends Vader's mastery was not merely martial or psychic, it was multidimensional, integrating perception, prediction, and execution in real time at scales beyond human comprehension. Engagements with Grey Knights further illustrated the anomaly of Legends Vader. The Emperor's elite daemon hunters, psychically attuned and trained to confront warp entities, found their predictive strategies countered by a being whose precognition operated on multiple axes simultaneously. Psychic attacks designed to destabilize or disorient were met with mental fortitude reinforced by the Force, while telekinetic strikes intercepted or redirected multiple attacks in concept.
Where Grey Knights relied on numbers, ritual, and psychic coordination, Legends Vader relied on anticipation, instantaneous adaptation, and the integrated application of speed, power, and strategy. No single knight, nor even squad, could match the comprehensive orchestration of attack and defense he brought to the battlefield. Narrative scenarios extended to the Emperor himself. While the Emperor's own mastery of psychic and martial capabilities remained unparalleled, Legends Vader's combination of precognition, speed, telekinesis, and battlefield orchestration allowed him to contest engagements in ways previously unimaginable. He could anticipate the Emperor's movements, counter minor psychic manipulations, and adapt instantaneously to environmental and psychic fluctuations. Direct confrontation might still favor the Emperor, yet the mere presence of Legends Vader forced the engagement into a contest of layered strategy, anticipation, and endurance, a scenario rarely encountered in the millennia-long campaigns of the Imperium. Faction responses across the galaxy reflected the unique threat he represented. Chaos daemons, unable to manipulate a being whose foresight countered the currents of the warp, approached engagements with caution and hesitation. Orcs, usually uncontrollable and violent, hesitated under his aura, momentarily subordinated by instinctive recognition of dominance. Tyranids, reacting to tactical and psychic influence, fragmented under his control. Eldar, masters of stealth and psychic subterfuge, found themselves preemptively countered, their ambushes rendered ineffective. Even the most disciplined Astartes chapters recognized that conventional combat doctrine failed in the presence of such an entity. The cumulative effect of Legends Vader's power was transformative. He redefined the metrics of victory. Raw strength, numbers, and conventional tactics became secondary to perception, prediction, and multidimensional mastery. Where Canon Vader enforced the Emperor's will with efficiency and fear, Legends Vader did so with inevitability, transforming battlefields into extensions of his will. His presence imposed constraints on every faction, shaping their actions before they occurred, neutralizing threats before they were realized, and redefining the very nature of combat in the 41st millennium. By the conclusion of this comparison, the scale of Legends Vader's impact was unmistakable. While Canon Vader remained a formidable agent capable of influencing campaigns, enforcing law, and commanding respect, Legends Vader approached a level of mastery that allowed him to challenge even the apex of mortal and superhuman power in the galaxy. Primarchs, Grey Knights, and even the Emperor faced a being whose integration of speed, precognition, telekinesis, and strategy created scenarios where traditional advantage was rendered moot. In the grim darkness of the far future, where war is eternal, and survival often hinges on preparation and reaction, Legends Vader represented a paradigm shift. He was not merely a warrior, he was an apex agent, capable of orchestrating victory across multiple scales simultaneously. Every faction, every commander, every psychic and martial entity confronted the undeniable truth. The difference between Canon and Legends Vader was not incremental, it was existential. Legends Vader was not just powerful, he was inevitable. A singularity in a galaxy defined by conflict, and a force whose presence could redefine the balance of the 41st millennium itself.
The void of space trembled as two galactic powers faced one another for the first time, the Imperium of Man and the Sith Empire. The clash was not merely military, but philosophical, a confrontation between ambition and dogma, between the mystical currents of the Force and the unpredictable, terrifying tides of the warp. At the forefront stood Darth Vader, now a fully integrated agent of the Emperor. his presence alone capable of shifting the outcomes of engagements both on planetary surfaces and across interstellar voids. Fleet-to-fleet combat became an intricate ballet of power, prediction, and devastating weaponry. Imperial Navy vessels, massive battleships bristling with turbo-lasers, macro-cannons, and torpedo launchers, faced star destroyers, sleek yet devastating capital ships capable of planet-strike operations and overwhelming firepower. The Imperium's commanders, accustomed to disciplined volleys and precise orbital bombardments, found themselves challenged by the Sith Empire's doctrine of rapid deployment, hyperdrive strikes, and force-coordinated coordination among ship captains and officers. Where Imperial doctrine relied on volume and durability, Sith strategy relied on speed, precision, and anticipatory maneuvers executed across multiple vectors simultaneously. Darth Vader's role in these engagements was pivotal. Using the Force to extend his awareness, he coordinated planetary defenses, fleet maneuvers, and boarding operations with precision beyond human comprehension. He could predict firing patterns, anticipate evasive maneuvers, and manipulate both ships and crews through fear, authority, and telekinetic influence. Where fleets would normally act in linear command structures, Vader created a fluid network of action, a lattice of strategy in which every Imperial vessel, every squad, and even terrain or debris became a tool for disruption or offense. Star destroyers found their attacks redirected, boarding parties intercepted, and strategic objectives neutralized before they could be executed, revealing the unique synthesis of Force and Imperial strategy. Planetary invasions tested the limits of both sides' soldiers. Astartes, disciplined and genetically enhanced, descended upon Sith-controlled worlds with tactical precision, utilizing drop pods, orbital bombardment, and coordinated assaults. Sith soldiers, trained in lightsaber combat, the dark side of the Force, and advanced military doctrine, countered with agility, predictive strikes, and coordinated Force-enhanced maneuvers. The battle became a contest of reflexes, skill, and foresight. Where Imperial squads moved in formation, Sith agents exploited verticality, rapid strikes, and the Force to disrupt cohesion. Yet Vader, acting as both commander and frontline operative, anticipated these maneuvers, coordinating Imperial strikes with telekinetic precision and preemptive deployment. Skirmishes escalated into symphonies of light, energy, and destruction, each side probing the other for weakness, while Vader subtly shaped the battlefield in the Imperium's favor. The contrast between Force and warp was stark. Sith practitioners drew upon the Force, channeling energy, enhancing reflexes, and manipulating the physical and mental state of opponents. Imperial psychers and warp-aligned entities relied on the turbulent, chaotic currents of the Imperium, where daemons, raw psychic power, and unpredictable energy flows created both opportunity and risk. Vader, uniquely positioned, could interpret and counter both immediately. He used the Force to stabilize his perception against warp turbulence, anticipate psychic attacks from demonic allies of the Sith, and manipulate environmental and physical variables simultaneously. In effect, he acted as a bridge between two mystical paradigms, able to exploit differences in energy sourcing, mental focus, and predictive strategy to turn engagements in favor of the Imperium. Philosophical contrasts became immediately apparent. Sith ambition was personal, focused on power, control, and the domination of others through mastery of the Force and martial discipline. Every action was a calculated step toward greater personal or organizational supremacy.
The Imperium, by contrast, operated under rigid dogma, loyalty to the Emperor, service above self, and survival through order, discipline, and collective purpose. Vader's unique position allowed him to interpret both frameworks simultaneously. He understood Sith ambition intimately, having served as the Emperor's apprentice in another galaxy. At the same time, he embodied Imperial dogma, translating his knowledge of ambition into instruments of obedience, coordinated strikes, and systematic suppression of heretical or adversarial elements. The long-term consequences of the confrontation were profound. Sith survival depended not merely on combat effectiveness, but on adaptability to a universe governed by warp, psychic instability, and overwhelming militarized ideology. Worlds accustomed to the Sith hierarchy faced annihilation or integration. Entire fleets capable of galactic domination were challenged not only by Imperial firepower, by a strategic and predictive adversary capable of reshaping every engagement. Darth Vader's presence magnified this effect, ensuring that the Imperium could anticipate, counter, and often preempt the Sith's best-laid plans. In effect, the Sith Empire confronted a paradox: the galaxy's most disciplined enforcers against a warrior who could exploit both foresight and supernatural perception in real time across multiple domains. Even before the first planets were fully contested, commanders on both sides recognized that this war would be unlike any in living memory. It was a clash not merely of armies or fleets, but of cosmic philosophies and mystical paradigms. Each engagement tested not only skill, power, and coordination, but the fundamental assumptions about the nature of the Force, the warp, and human or alien capability. Darth Vader, standing at the intersection of these conflicts, became the focal point, enforcer, strategist, and living instrument of inevitability.
As the initial confrontation subsided, the galaxy began to feel the long-term implications of a clash between the Imperium and the Sith Empire. The war was not a mere series of battles. It became a test of endurance, strategy, and philosophical supremacy. Planets once considered secure under Sith dominion faced annihilation or absorption into the Imperium's rigid hierarchy. Fleet engagements had revealed vulnerabilities. Hyperdrive coordination, star destroyer formations, and force-dependent strategies could be anticipated, countered, and nullified through Imperial doctrine combined with Darth Vader's unparalleled command. Darth Vader became the linchpin of the Imperium's offensive and defensive strategies. On the planetary scale, he directed Astartes chapters, coordinating orbital strikes, drop pod insertions, and ground campaigns with precision that even the most meticulous Imperial strategists could scarcely match. Sith forces accustomed to rapid deployment and aggressive shock tactics found themselves confined, reacting to maneuvers they could neither predict nor fully counter. Darth Vader's use of the Force allowed him to anticipate Force-sensitive adversaries, neutralize Force-enhanced attacks, and manipulate battlefield conditions with both subtlety and overwhelming power. Strategically, the Imperium leveraged Vader to orchestrate multi-theater campaigns that integrated fleet action, planetary assault, and intelligence operations simultaneously. Star destroyers attempting surprise attacks were intercepted in transit. Planetary garrisons facing Astartes assaults found their defenses dismantled by predictive strikes and preemptive sabotage. Sith commanders discovered that their doctrine, once sufficient to dominate isolated systems, was inadequate against an opponent capable of harmonizing Force awareness with Imperial operational discipline. Entire theaters of war fell to rapid, precise, and coordinated Imperial campaigns, emphasizing efficiency over attrition and inevitability over brute force. The philosophical disparity between the Sith and the Imperium became a decisive factor in long-term outcomes. Sith ambition, focused on individual and factional power, collided with the Imperium's collective dogma and adherence to the Emperor's will. While Sith forces could inspire a loyalty through fear and personal charisma, Vader's integration of Force mastery with Imperial authority created an unassailable psychological edge. Enemies recognized that resistance was not merely dangerous, but futile, for every action was countered by a being who anticipated intentions, predicted outcomes, and enforced order with absolute precision. The moral and psychological weight of this realization reshaped the conflict, diminishing initiative and creating systemic advantages for the Imperium across multiple fronts. The survival of the Sith Empire became increasingly precarious. Worlds under Sith control faced two existential threats: the overwhelming physical and psychic power of Imperial campaigns and the inevitability of Vader's strategic foresight. Even Sith lords and Force-sensitive elites who might normally counter Imperial tactics through individual skill or Force manipulation were forced into defensive or reactive postures. The cumulative effect of continuous Imperial pressure, battlefield anticipation, and the psychological dominance of Vader's presence created a scenario where annihilation became increasingly likely, and long-term survival required unprecedented adaptability or the abandonment of conventional strategies altogether. Yet the confrontation was not entirely one-sided. The Sith Empire demonstrated resilience, leveraging the dark side of the Force to conduct guerrilla operations, execute surprise attacks, and exploit vulnerabilities in Imperial bureaucracy. Hyperdrive-enabled maneuvers allowed temporary evasion, while Force-enhanced perception provided localized battlefield superiority. These tactics, while effective in isolated engagements, could not offset the broader systemic advantages provided by the Imperial's hierarchical structure, disciplined forces, and Vader's predictive orchestration. In essence, the Sith could win battles, but the war's trajectory favored the Imperium in terms of sustainability, coordination, and inevitability. Long-term, the encounter reshaped galactic power dynamics. Planets previously aligned with the Sith were integrated into the Imperium's domain either through conquest, political absorption, or coercive enforcement. The presence of Force-sensitive entities in these regions created a new class of psychic threats and assets, forcing the Imperium to develop specialized response protocols and consider novel strategic doctrines. Darth Vader's example set a precedent: a Force wielder not as autonomous conqueror, but as integrated executor of Imperial authority, demonstrating that mystical power could be harmonized with rigid hierarchy and collective purpose. The philosophical lesson was profound. Sith ambition emphasized domination, personal power, and the pursuit of immortality or supremacy at the expense of collective security. The Imperium, by contrast, emphasized duty, loyalty, and survival through order, discipline, and the execution of the Emperor's vision. Vader's role illustrated the synthesis of power and purpose: personal mastery redirected toward collective authority, individual potential harnessed to enforce doctrine, and fear converted into a tool of control rather than self-aggrandizement. In the clash of ideologies, the Imperium's rigid dogma, amplified by Vader's unmatched skill, proved more sustainable and effective than the Sith's personalistic model of conquest. Ultimately, the confrontation concluded with a galaxy irrevocably altered. The Sith Empire, once a formidable and cohesive force, faced annihilation in several sectors and permanent subjugation in others. Imperial fleets, Astartes legions, and Vader himself demonstrated the capacity to integrate speed, foresight, psychic mastery, and tactical doctrine into an unstoppable campaign framework. The galaxy had witnessed a collision not only of military power, but of philosophical principles,
mystical paradigms, and the practical application of inevitability. Darth Vader emerged as both executioner and symbol, the embodiment of the Emperor's will, the counterbalance to Sith ambition, and the ultimate agent of order in a universe defined by chaos, war, and relentless conflict.
The galaxy had changed. Centuries of conflict, incalculable death, and the ever-present shadow of the warp had witnessed the rise of a being who was neither wholly of the Imperium nor entirely of another universe. Darth Vader, once the servant of Palpatine, now stood as the Emperor's chosen instrument, a weapon forged by war, refined by discipline, and bound by purpose beyond personal ambition. He had walked the stars, confronted the demonic and the mortal alike, and reshaped the course of galactic-scale conflicts. In the grim darkness of the far future, he had become something more than warrior or executioner. He had become inevitability incarnate. The Imperium, vast and rigid, had adopted him not as a servant in the ordinary sense, but as an apex agent, a singular force capable of influencing the outcome of campaigns across light years. Planets had fallen under his direction, fleets had maneuvered with his insight, and demonic incursions had been neutralized by his combination of physical might and force mastery. Where ordinary Imperial commanders relied on doctrine and numbers, Vader relied on perception, foresight, and decisive action. He became the fulcrum upon which entire theaters of war tilted, a being whose presence alone altered calculations, disrupted enemy cohesion, and inspired both awe and terror among allies and adversaries alike. Yet his power came at a cost, deeply personal and hauntingly tragic. Rage, once unrestrained and consuming, was tempered but never extinguished. The pain of past failure, the memory of loss, and the specter of his former self lingered beneath the armor, a shadow that colored every command, every strike, and every decision. Even as he enforced the Emperor's will with unwavering efficiency, a part of Vader remained tethered to a universe of regret, betrayal, and unfinished conflict. The dark energy that had once driven him toward domination was now channeled into duty and necessity, shaping his actions without erasing the core of his being. He was still Darth Vader, tragic, relentless, and irrevocably defined by both rage and purpose. The lessons of his integration into the Imperium were profound. Power, once a tool for domination in the galaxy far, far away, became an instrument of enforcement and stability. Loyalty, once pledged to a master consumed by ambition, became a disciplined obedience to a higher vision, a cosmic order embodied in the Emperor and codified through the Imperium's hierarchy. Morality, long a malleable concept shaped by passion and personal desire, was now reframed in the context of survival, duty, and the grim realities of the 41st millennium. Vader's existence became a lens through which the galaxy could examine the interplay of strength, obedience, and ethics in a universe defined by endless war and cosmic entropy. Even as the Imperium thrived under his influence, Vader's presence reminded all observers of the duality of power. To some, he was a guardian and an instrument of justice, a being who brought certainty to chaos and order to disorder. To others, he was a harbinger of fear, a living weapon whose precision and ruthlessness left no room for mercy. Space Marines, Astarte's commanders, and even the Primarchs, those who had faced him in hypothetical or direct scenarios, understood that his alignment with the Imperium did not diminish his capacity for devastation. Every action was deliberate, calculated, and inevitable. And even the mightiest adversaries had learned that opposition often merely delayed the outcome dictated by Vader's will. In his final narrative arc, Vader embodied the synthesis of tragedy and power, of rage transformed into instrumentality, and of personal mastery directed toward collective purpose. He moved through fleets and battlefields with the precision of a being attuned to the flow of war itself. He confronted heretics, xenos, and demonic entities alike, leaving devastation in his wake not out of ambition, but out of duty. His presence became legend, whispered among Imperial citizens, documented in battle logs, and analyzed by the galaxy's most brilliant strategists as the definitive example of combining individual mastery with institutional authority. In the end, Darth Vader's fate was neither simple nor wholly redemptive. He was bound by rage, shaped by loss, and haunted by his former identity, yet he had found a new purpose. He had become a weapon of the Imperium, a living enforcer of its will, and a symbol of the convergence between unmatched power and unwavering discipline. The galaxy watched, awed and terrified, as a being once consumed by personal ambition became the ultimate executor of order, a sentinel whose authority and capability transcended mortal comprehension. The cinematic truth of his existence resonated across star systems and millennia. In the grim darkness of the far future, where every star harbored conflict and every shadow threatened annihilation, there was only war. And Darth Vader, tragic yet unstoppable, fit perfectly into it. His legacy would endure not merely in stories or monuments, but in the very outcomes of wars, the fates of worlds, and the unyielding march of the Emperor's will. He was a reminder that power, discipline, and purpose could coexist even in the darkest epochs of history, and that even the most tragic of figures could become an instrument of absolute inevitability.